I was at a dinner party recently, and I was watching a close friend of mine, we can call him David, and he was just holding court at the center of the table.
Uh-huh.
He was telling this story, perfectly animated, hitting every single punchline with what looked like just pure spontaneous joy.
The perfect dinner guest.
Exactly. And everyone was captivated, laughing along. They were convinced they were seeing this really charismatic guy just being himself.
Right.
But the thing is, I've been so deep in the sociology of Erving Goffman lately that I couldn't see the person anymore. I could only see the mechanic.
Oh, wow. You had the Goffman goggles on.
I really did. I was watching his eyes, and they were darting around, checking the audience reaction after every single sentence. I saw him subtly adjust his posture, not for comfort, but to project this idea of relaxed confidence.
He was managing the impression.
Totally. And then came this turning point. The moment the conversation shifted to someone else, I saw it. The mask didn't just fade, it vanished.
A lot.
Instantly. His face went completely blank, like a light switch had been flicked off. He wasn't resting, he was backstage, calculating his next entrance.
That's chilling.
It was so chilling. That split-second shift from warm friend to cold calculator. And it just perfectly illustrated the danger of seeing life strictly as a performance. It starts as this useful way to explain social skills, but it can end up convincing you that the acting is all there is.
And that forces you to ask a really terrifying question.
Right. If we are always performing, always managing impressions, and curating our identity, is there actually anyone left inside the costume?
And that right there is the central, unsettling terror of our current reality. I mean, Goffman gave us the language dramaturgy to describe how social interaction works. He showed us that fundamentally we're all doing impression management to some degree.
It's just what we do to get along in society.
It's what we do. But what we're grappling with now is how that descriptive model has been totally transformed into an inescapable a requirement for survival in the 21st century.
That's the mission for this deep dive. We're going to trace that intellectual line from Goffman's mid-century observations about, social etiquette, all the way to the algorithms that govern our visibility, our labor, and our income today.
It's a huge leap.
It is. But the insight here is how this sociological framework, maybe inadvertently, provides the theoretical blueprint for the erosion of institutional trust we see everywhere. When performance becomes mandatory, sincerity gets really expensive.
We're basically exploring how that boundary, the one you saw with your friend David, between the sincere self and the calculating actor, is just dissolving under the pressure of what's being called platform capitalism.
So we had to look at how this constant need to perform is impacting everything, from the fundamental mechanics of how we interact with each other, all the way up to the core of civic virtue.
It touches everything.
Okay, so let's start exactly where Goffman started. Let's establish the vocabulary. If social life is a kind of theater, what's the essential toolkit we need to understand it?
The foundation, the absolute bedrock, is the concept of performance. And it means basically everything an individual does while they're in front of observers that has some kind of influence on those observers.
So it's not just intentional acting like putting on a show?
No, not at all. That's a crucial point. It's all activity that helps define the social situation for other people, even things you do unconsciously.
Okay, so that's the performance. And the front region, that's the outward projection of that performance, right?
Correct. The front is all the fixed expressive equipment. Think of it as your stage set. It's the setting, your clothing, your demeanor, your manner of speaking, everything you use to define the situation for your audience.
And the key here is consistency.
Consistency is everything. We expect that someone's appearance and their role have to be congruent. The performance has to make sense.
Like if a doctor walks in wearing scrubs and acting confident, we accept that.
Yeah.
That's the definition of the situation. We're in a medical setting, this person's in charge.
Exactly. But if they showed up in, bathing suit and seemed really unsure about the difference between an aspirin and an antibiotic, the whole performance would just collapse. The front would crumble.
So any social role comes with this obligation. You don't just have to do the task, you have to successfully stage the performance that the audience expects for that role.
And that obligation is what shapes us over time. This is where it gets really interesting. We see this journey from, let's say, purely external compliance to an internalized respect for the role.
What's a good example of that?
Think of a raw army recruit. At first, he performs all the military etiquette, the saluting, the sir, yes, sir, purely to avoid punishment. His performance is cynical, it's strategic.
He's just doing it to not get in trouble.
Exactly. But the sources we're looking at suggest that Eventually, he starts following the rules to prevent organizational shame, to earn the respect of his peers. The performance, which was initially adopted out of fear, becomes internalized. It starts to shape his identity to actually align with the role of a soldier.
It's the ultimate fake it till you make it scenario. But the faking actually molds the making. That happened with those Crofter hotel managers, didn't it? That's another great example.
It did, yeah. It's a fascinating case. These were individuals from a traditional island community in Britain, Crofters, who opened a hotel catering to middle-class tourists from the mainland.
And their native culture was totally different from what their guests expected.
Completely alien. So they were immediately forced to stage this full performance of middle-class services and demeanor, the way they served food, the way they spoke, the decor. All of it was a performance.
And at first, they were cynical about it.
Totally cynical. They were just doing it for the money. But the analysis showed that over time, they became, and this is a quote, enamored of the selves their clients impute to them.
Wow. So the role became seductive.
It did. They started to internalize the character they were playing. The performance wasn't just a mask anymore. It was becoming a part of them.
That is such a profound takeaway. The performance itself can actually transform the person you are underneath. So, okay, if the front is this meticulously managed show, where does the messier, more truthful self get contained?
That lives in the backstage, or the back region. This is the privileged space. It's where the performance is prepared, where you can have informal conduct, the relaxation of your character, and most importantly, it's where suppressed, discrediting facts are allowed to appear.
It's the region where, to go back to my anecdote, my friend David could just turn off that light switch.
That's his backstage moment.
And that boundary, that line between the front and the back, that's where all the stress and conflict must live. It has to be strictly controlled, otherwise the entire performance is just instantly ruined.
And we have a perfect, really vivid illustration of this exact conflict from that same island hotel study, the famous kitchen door conflict.
Right, I love this story.
It's so good because it's so simple. So the kitchen was the backstage for the dining room. In the kitchen, the lower esteem crofter habits prevailed. So different standards of cleanliness, informal speech, different ways of preparing food.
The reality behind the show.
The reality. Meanwhile, the managers were desperately trying to uphold this middle-class veneer in the dining room, which was the front.
So what happened when the maids, the staff, wanted to keep the kitchen doors open?
Well, the maids had what Goffman would call instrumental concerns. For them, open doors just allowed them to move food trays more easily and to peek out and see if guests were ready for the next course. It was about efficiency.
From their perspective, they were just servants. They didn't have a huge reputation to lose if a guest happened to glance in.
Exactly. But the crofter managers, the couple running the place, they had everything to lose.
Because they were the ones responsible for maintaining that illusion of middle-class respectability.
Precisely. They knew that if a guest saw those lower esteem habits, the reality of the crofter culture, it would immediately discredit their entire middle-class performance. So they insisted the doors be kept closed.
And it became a real battle.
A physical battle. Days were spent with doors being angrily banged shut and then angrily banged back open. It was a literal physical struggle between instrumental efficiency, just getting the job done, and dramaturgical concern, maintaining the impression.
That anecdote is so powerful because it shows the sheer fragility of the performance. I mean, if a kitchen door can wreck a carefully staged dinner service, you have to imagine the treachery of the digital world where the wall between front and back is just a line of code or a single accidental swipe.
That vulnerability is precisely what Goffman noticed, even before the internet existed. He suggested that technical failures or any kind of unintended exposure like accidentally broadcasting backstage conduct make the walls separating front and back very treacherous.
He basically anticipated the hot mic moment.
He totally did. That moment where a careless word or action instantly compromises the entire definition of the situation the performers were trying so hard to maintain.
Okay, so let's talk about information control, because that seems to be the key to maintaining any front, whether it's a cynical performance or a sincere one. What are strategic secrets?
This is a really crucial distinction. Strategic secrets are pieces of information that are withheld not because they're inherently malicious or dark or morally wrong.
So it's not like you're hiding a crime.
Not at all. They are hidden simply because their disclosure would render the previous, careful, studied ambiguity useless. It would just completely disrupt the team's performance.
So it's not about hiding something illegal. It's about hiding something that just ruins the flow of the show.
Exactly that. You hide a strategic secret, let's say, the fact that you haven't actually started preparing for the big meeting yet, or that the amazing new product is really just a prototype held together with duct tape. You hide that because if the audience knew, the careful air of control, of competence, of readiness you were projecting would instantly crumble. The secrecy preserves the effectiveness of the show. If that secret gets out prematurely, the whole facade collapses, no matter how good the eventual outcome might be.
So to sum up this first part, we're left with this foundational understanding. Social life is a series of strategic performances. The front is the illusion, the back is where you manage that illusion, and the boundary between them is this constant source of stress and potential failure.
That's the core of the Goffmanian toolkit.
Okay, so let's transition now. We're moving from that mid-century sociological observation of behavior to the modern economic requirement of behavior. If the kitchen door was the site of conflict in the 1950s, what happens when that wall is replaced by a constantly monitoring screen?
The change is, it's fundamental. Because the environment now demands continuous performance and continuous quantification. The self online, what some call the dialogical self, is still negotiated through communication, but that negotiation happens entirely within the constraints of platform affordances.
The technological tools are actually structuring who we're allowed to be.
Precisely. The like button, the comment thread, the content curation algorithm, these are not just neutral ways to interact, they are mandates for certain types of self-presentation.
So identity is no longer this static thing.
It's not. It's a mobile network deployed fluidly across different platforms, but every single deployment is governed by metrics. This is what creates the algorithmic self and the rise of the micro-celebrity, even if you're just posting vacation photos for your family.
So when I check the engagement on a post, the likes, the comments, I'm actually participating in the quantification of my own selfhood.
You are. You, as a user, are monitoring the performance of your content within a competitive structure for visibility. And visibility is often a zero-sum game. The success of one piece of content, the thing that goes viral, often comes at the expense of another.
And the measurable results, your metrics, become this social and economic imperative.
That's it. That is the exact point where Goffman's descriptive model of performance starts to become a survival mandate.
And this constant demand for metric-driven self-presentation, it must just shatter the traditional idea of authenticity. I mean, if I'm always tailoring my output for maximum likes, am I ever truly being me?
Authenticity gets radically redefined. It is no longer some inherent property of a person, something internal and sincere that you possess. It becomes a claim that is either accepted or rejected by relevant others.
So the focus shifts entirely away from monitoring your inner sincerity.
And it shifts toward how you think you're being perceived. The goal is the successful performance of authenticity. You have to look and sound real enough for the algorithm and the audience to reward you with their attention.
This constant self-monitoring, trying to hit these moving targets of digital expectations, it just sounds completely exhausting. But I want to zoom in on the specific nature of this digital self. You mentioned the term Divigils. Can you unpack that for us? Is that just a fancy word for saying we're all fragmented?
It's a bit deeper than just fragmentation. The idea comes from the philosopher Gilles Deleuze, who observed that the traditional individual, this idea of a whole contained person, was breaking down.
Yeah.
In the world of platforms, individuals become Divigils, meaning they're endlessly subdividable. The platform doesn't need to know you as host, speaker, citizen with a passport. That's not useful information for it.
So what does the platform need then?
It needs clusters of descriptive information. Your abstract subjectivity, that's what's functional for extraction and control. It needs to know about the person who likes specific genres of music, the person who browses expensive holidays on Tuesday afternoons, the person who spends exactly 3 minutes looking at a certain political article.
So I'm just subdivided into these data points that are functional to the commercial logic of the platform.
That's all you are to the system. You are a collection of profitable traits, all segmented and organized.
That's a really chilling abstraction of a person.
And this whole process is recursive. The algorithm uses this abstracted data to produce my recommendations, whether that's for content, for purchases, or even for people to connect with. And this forms what's called a machinic reciprocal learning loop.
A learning loop.
Yeah, the platform shapes your identity by showing you what it thinks you are based on your data, and then your subsequent engagement with those recommendations either confirms or slightly modifies that identity for the machine. The algorithm and the subject become fused.
And that fusion, that cycle, it has to generate this enormous internal pressure. We're not just responding to external demands from an audience anymore. The algorithm is actively shaping our internal motivations for self-governance.
Exactly. This is where the descriptive Goffmanian self-management meets what's often termed neoliberal governmentality. That compelling external pressure to be flexible, to continuously communicate, to constantly improve ourselves, it gets internalized. We become these actively manufactured subjects, perfectly aligning our own self-activation with market fluidity.
It's what the sources call the active combination. The human ability to create and perform combined with the encoded algorithmic procedures. The machine extracts value from you, but at the same time, it's molding you, the subject, into a more optimized and ultimately more exploitable version of yourself.
And if the algorithmic self is the result of this pressure, then the gig economy is the most visible and perhaps most brutal laboratory for its implementation. This is where strategic performance is fully weaponized for maximum value extraction.
This is where we see that shift from social description to economic mandate most clearly. If you've already internalized the need to constantly optimize your digital self for likes, the leap to optimizing your labor self for a better rating seems pretty small.
It's the ultimate expression of that neoliberal injunction. You must run your entire life, including your labor, as a perpetually optimizing, highly flexible, competitive business. And the platforms are masters at obscuring this control.
How so?
They meticulously avoid words like employ or subordination. They use this friendly, sanitized language. You're a user, a partner, an independent contractor. They promote activities like food delivery as fun challenges or even a sport with bonuses and leaderboards attached.
It's a linguistic veil that's hiding the fundamental asymmetry of the labor relationship. But how does this algorithmic management actually enforce control without using traditional managers and supervisors?
They use a combination of two forms of control. First, there's direct control, which is basically digital Taylorism applied to human movement.
Digital Taylorism?
Yes, scientific management for the digital age. This involves tracking, limiting, and directly directing a worker's behavior. For a food delivery courier, this means being assigned orders with only a few seconds to accept them, often without seeing the full location details.
So the worker is just stripped of the ability to make any kind of informed decision about their own labor.
They are forced into maximum efficiency for the system. The platforms even encourage workers to use an auto-assignment mode, which removes the possibility of selection entirely. The algorithm decides, and the worker has to comply for the system to function at peak efficiency.
But that's just the direct control. You said the more insidious form is the indirect control, this responsible autonomy.
Right. And this is where Goffman's performance mandate is fully integrated into the labor process. Workers are required to view themselves as entrepreneurs who are responsible for optimizing their own workload.
They have to become their own manager.
They have to internalize all the market imperatives. They are their own HR department, their own logistics manager, their own motivator. The tough management decisions, the need for speed, the pressure for efficiency, they seem to evaporate behind these forces that feel objective, like market fluidity or user demand.
But the real power resides in the black box power, the complete opacity of the algorithm that's driving their income.
That opacity creates this intense, debilitating uncertainty. And we see the direct impact of this in the studies. A survey of German food couriers found that 63% reported feeling at the mercy of technology either often or very often.
They can't see the logic, they can't appeal to decisions, they have no idea why one day they're getting good jobs and the next they're getting terrible ones.
None. And that uncertainty, in this context, it translates directly into self-policing.
Of course.
Exactly. Because the system is opaque and you don't know the rules, the workers internalize the need to perform perfectly just in case. They strive to continually improve their ranking. If their order acceptance rate is low or their average customer evaluation slips by a fraction of a point, they get pushed down the pecking order.
And a high score means you get earlier access to the lucrative shifts, while a low score means you're only offered the distant, least remunerative deliveries.
So if you want to eat, you have to constantly log on, you have to accept the bad jobs, you have to strive for maximum availability, all simply to please this invisible digital machine that determines your ranking. The machine literally performs subjectivity by channeling all human capacity exclusively toward achieving a high score performance.
And this mandate of self-exploitation, It accelerated dramatically with the COVID-19 pandemic, didn't it? This is where the idea of the digital spatial fix comes in.
It did.
That sounds like some heavy jargon.
Yeah.
What does digital spatial fix actually mean in practical terms for somebody?
It means that the worker's private residence, their home, the most classic Goffmanian Backstage, the sanctuary where the mask was supposed to come off, is now formally subsumed as digital abstract space.
What do you mean by that?
Well, historically, capitalist production required workers to physically come to a factory or an office, a space owned by the company. Now, the private home is being formally integrated into the capitalist extraction chain.
So my home is no longer just my private residence. It's become an outsourced logistical node, a production center for the platform.
Precisely. And this implies what's called a real subsumption of laborer's subjectivity, which becomes domesticated. The pressure intensifies because the line between your personal time and your productive time just disappears. Individuals have to be hyper-adaptable and flexible, combining operativity and productivity seamlessly within their previously protected private lives.
So the need to maintain that perfect performance score follows the worker right into their bedroom. There is no backstage anymore.
The backstage has been colonized.
That is a staggering realization.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try to connect this relentless pressure for optimal performance from the micro level of the gig worker and the digital self up to the macro level themes of politics and institutional trust. If we are all performing for the algorithm, what happens to the integrity of our institutions?
Well, the totalizing nature of datafication is now transforming even institutions that were previously seen as relying purely on intellectual merit. We see the performance mandate being applied directly to skilled academic labor through the use of online learning environments, or OLEs.
You mean platforms like Canvas or Zoom that became so essential during the pandemic and remote work? How do they enforce performance control on faculty and on students?
These systems enforce control through datafication and data valence. Critics argue that this process essentially rationalizes and de-skills skilled academic labor. Faculty members are increasingly being turned into machine tenders for remote monitoring and measuring.
So their complex, nuanced work of teaching is just reduced to measurable data points and competencies.
That's the fear. And the data that's accumulated goes far beyond just grading papers or tracking attendance.
What else is it tracking?
It's vast. The data is integrated with credit records, social media profiles, plagiarism detection software. It's designed to measure not just learning outcomes, but student work habits, their efficiency, and critically, their willingness to work. The very architecture of these OLEs provides a surveillance system that subjects students to a potentially lifelong digital profile of their compliance and productivity.
That sounds incredibly invasive. That data essentially creates a commercially available work record score that could follow a student long after they graduate. It reduces education itself to just a performance of compliance.
It absolutely shifts the focus from intellectual curiosity to measurable labor. If your performance is compliant, on time, and quantifiable, you score well, regardless of the quality of your deeper understanding.
Okay, let's pivot from institutions to public interaction. Let's talk about civility. If we know that everyone is performing a role, how can we possibly tell if someone is being genuinely good or if they're just being strategically manipulative?
This is a huge problem. And to understand it, we have to look at the two different dimensions of civility. The first is what we can call civility as politeness.
Okay, what's that?
This is just minimal public deference. It's respecting a cue, using pleasant language, not being physically rough. It's purely functional. It acts as a lubricant for society, promoting a kind of non-murderous coexistence.
And it's often motivated by purely pragmatic reasons.
Completely. I'm polite to the person serving my coffee so they don't spit in it. It's a strategic performance for a desired outcome.
Right. It's the low-stakes, operational definition of just getting along. So what's the second higher-stakes dimension?
That is civility as public-mindedness. And this requires a substantive moral respect. It means genuinely recognizing other people as free and equal members of society. This moral bedrock is absolutely essential for a functioning liberal democracy. If we lose the substantive respect, the entire system begins to degrade.
And the danger, then, is the strategic performance of the first kind of civility politeness to mask a complete lack of the second.
Precisely. This is the strategic weaponization of civility. We see actors who will strategically appeal to what's called justificatory civility. They'll use principles like free speech or gender equality to mask morally uncivil goals, often exclusionism.
So they're using the language of liberal democracy to push an illiberal agenda.
Exactly. By framing their discriminatory actions in this high-minded progressive language, they make exclusionism appear liberal and progressive.
So the performance of virtue completely overrides the underlying moral intent. They are using the front of liberal discourse to enact a backstage agenda of exclusion. This has to lead directly to a decay of generalized trust in society.
It is a classic dramaturgical consequence. Goffman called it the cynicism of the service class. Think back to the people who attend to the front of higher status clients. The janitors, the hotel maids, the low-level professionals who service the elite.
The people who literally clean up the mess or fix the things the audience isn't supposed to see.
Yes. And this position gives them an incredibly high degree of information control about the clients backstage. They know what really goes on.
And this creates a profound ambivalence.
It does. The specialist feels, on one hand, vicariously intimate with the better world they service. They're close to power and wealth. But at the same time, they become deeply cynical because they witness the constant moral failures and weaknesses of the elite.
Can you give us some of those historical examples of that backstage knowledge?
Goffman provided some really vivid ones. The filling station manager who sees the man driving a brand new Cadillac, a symbol of success, pull in and only buy $1 worth of the cheapest gas.
The performance doesn't match the reality.
Or the hotel maid who sees the reputable businessman whose conduct downstairs in the lobby is immaculate, making crass passes at her upstairs in the hallway.
Or the police officer who's asked by a reputable pillar of the community to do illegal favors for them.
Exactly. These small discrediting facts, they aggregate. The service class collectively knows that the entire performance, the show that the pillars of society are putting on, is a fragile facade.
And when this collective knowledge gets disseminated, it undermines the legitimacy of all these high-status roles and creates a generalized, pervasive distrust that everyone is merely acting and no one is sincere.
We have traced this line from the simple etiquette rules of a small island hotel all the way to the digital mandates of our current society. The mission was to explore whether Goffman's descriptive model of impression management has been transformed into a prescriptive mandate for survival, and the evidence points overwhelmingly to yes.
That shift from "we perform" to "you must perform," that really feels like the defining terror of our time. Performance is no longer an optional tool for social navigation. It is an inescapable economic reality. The algorithmic nature of platform capitalism demands constant optimization for visibility, for income, and even for social survival.
The extracting value process in platform capitalism isn't passive. It actively models our subjectivity. If you don't engage in that constant self-optimization and self-policing to maximize your ranking, the system makes it economically painful for you to survive. The imperative to perform is mandatory for both labor and visibility.
And this creates a fundamental tension that shapes all of our choices. On one side, we have the instrumental requirements of digital life. You have to quantify and perform for the machine just to secure income and status.
Yeah, and on the other side, you have the civic requirements of a functioning high-trust society. That society demands authentic, substantive moral respect, that civility is public-mindedness, and that has to supersede cynical politeness or purely strategic performance.
But the relentless demand for efficiency and optimization has followed the worker from the factory floor through that digital spatial fix and right into their private home. It relentlessly elevates the strategic, calculating self that my friend David was using at that dinner party.
The fear is that the widespread adoption of a performance-first mindset is just dissolving the internal boundary between the front and the backstage. If the back region is now formally subsumed under capitalist production, and the self is constantly self-policing to meet algorithmic metrics, then the question ceases to be whether the cold calculator is the only self left in the costume.
The question becomes,
perhaps the costume is the person now.
Thank you for guiding us through this deep dive. We've traced the chilling evolution of our identity from a sociological observation to an economic imperative, and we've examined how our selfhood is continually being negotiated in an active combination with the digital machine. It feels like a profound social cost that we're all paying for optimization.
And we have only begun to understand the complexity of asserting agency in a world where the infrastructure itself has a transformative and assertive force on our subjectivity. I mean, the geoeconomic contest between the major digital platforms, it relies on these technical and business logics that produce new social relations entirely distinct from previous forms of control. The power of these systems have to transform the world in ways specific to their own internal metrics that continues to shape the battlefield of our selfhood.